Well, the economy, as you may well know, is one of the big concerns for Zimbabweans as they head to those crucial elections. Forbes Africa Head of Programming, Chris Bishop, joins us now on ENCA now to talk further about what to expect. Good morning to you, Chris. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
So, in preparation or in the run-up to this election, the economy has been quite a big deal. But looking at what we've heard from either parties, does it appear that either the ZANU-PF or the MDC have the winning formula?
Well, I think it's neck and neck. I think this is going to be one of the most closely contested elections in the history of an independent and free Zimbabwe, number one. I think both candidates, you've got Emmerson Mnangagwa, he's got the establishment and the weight of the party behind him. You have to understand some people in Zimbabwe will vote ZANU-PF for the rest of their lives, and that's it. Nelson Chamisa, a lot younger, a lot more energetic. I think he is making it quite a bit. He's certainly pulling massive crowds. I've spoken to him a few times, and I think he's a very, very sharp operator. I think he'll get on. But ultimately, I think this is the business election. This is it. I think it's one of the last chance saloons for the economy, because essentially, I think if Zimbabwe doesn't start reconstructing its infrastructure, getting more foreign investment and getting more trade with the rest of the world, you've got to remember it's still the biggest trading partner with South Africa. I think there's going to be real trouble. And I think it took a very short time to run the economy down. It's going to take a very long time to build it back up again.
Much is made of the economy in Zimbabwe, and rightfully so, but just how dire is the economic situation there? Well,
this is it. I mean, one of the things that's good about this election, from what I'm hearing from people on the ground, I mean, I worked there for 5 years, I think that is that it's very peaceful. There's not that kind of terrible, bloody fighting there was in previous elections. But I think the thing is, the economy is an underrated thing here. I think Emmerson Mnangagwa is desperate for a strong mandate so he can go to the rest of the world and say, look, here we are. It may have come to power with the help of a few soldiers, but ultimately, I've got the people behind me now. Please come, give us trade, give us investment. I think that it's a time where he needs to get the confidence of investors. He needs to get the confidence of people to put money in. But things are difficult up there. I mean, for instance, I ran into one of the presidential candidates just down the road here in the bread shop in Ilovo a few weeks ago. And he said, he's going to fight the election. I said, oh, great. He said, no, it's not great. He said, I've got no petrol and I only get $50 a day. You know, there's a restriction on currency, the amount of foreign currency you can have. I only get $50 a day. He said, so, and the government's got all the petrol and all the currency that it needs. So it's already tilted. I think certainly if the NDC win this one, it's a genuine, full-on, free win, because I think that they've got to get a really overwhelming majority to stand a chance of winning.
How crucial is it that whoever wins come Monday deals with the issue of the controversial bond notes? Because you speak to Zimbabweans living here and back in Harare, the bond notes are still a very big issue for people, and I would imagine that a significant amount of the messaging around campaigning would focus on getting rid of basics such as the bond notes.
Well, exactly. I mean, when the bond note came in, a lot of the Zimbabweans I know doing business there, they said, oh, that's good. And they said, no, we're not going to touch it. I said, why? Because we don't trust it. It's not money, you see. And when that bond note came in, the government said, oh, it's all right. We're going to stepping back towards our own currency, by the way, which would take years to reinstate. But the bond note, I mean, we've done stories, when I was still on Forbes Africa, we did stories about the bond note, saying that people were trading like, 2 to 1 with the dollar, sometimes even more. People were trading on street corners because people don't trust it, and it's not worth as much as real money. And that's the problem. When you lose your currency that way, when you forego the currency, then it's always going to be a problem, trying to get it back.
Do you think the economic situation in Zimbabwe would render whatever victory is secured on Monday a hollow one, as some have suggested that things are so bad that whoever wins won't get to enjoy a presidency?
Well, yes. I mean, I think, for instance, I remember reading when I went to Davos in Switzerland in January, the investment document that Emmerson Mnangagwa came out ahead of the conference. He went there looking for investors, and some of the stuff in there was absolutely almost laughable. I mean, you look at it, for instance, they were saying, oh, they were going to pay farmers back compensation for land that was lost from a treasury that's almost bust. I mean, really? They said they were going to have courts to decide what people who had lost property. And that's one thing. Once you lose that confidence in property rights, once you lose that stability, it can take decades to get it back, years to get it back. And my point is that I think that Mnangagwa, yeah, I mean, sure, he's also seen as one of the old guard as well. He's been in the cabinet since 1980. when he was recruited as a young lawyer by Robert Mugabe. I'm sure he said he's going to be peaceful elections, he's trying to get investment, but I think whoever wins this election, whoever runs the country is going to have a real uphill battle, and they've got to do something radical, I think, to try to revive the economy.
And let's talk about investment. There's much focus from both the ZANU-PF and the MDC on foreign investments. Just how widely should they cast their net post-Monday?
Well, I think so. I mean, you look at the BRICS conference we've all been attending this week. I mean, I think they've certainly got to look to China, they've got to look to India, Russia, the emerging economies with the muscle and the money. I think that's number one. I think still they have to look to Europe and some of the older economies there, I think, and South Africa too. But the problem you've got when you break that trust and you fear that your property could be, I mean, just going back a little bit, 1995, President Robert Mugabe went to London, great investment conference, great presentation, and at the end of it, he asked for any questions, and somebody put their hand up and said, if I put my money into Zimbabwe today, could it be nationalized tomorrow? That's the way people are feeling sometimes. But again, if somebody's radical, if somebody comes in and says, okay, guys, new slate, clean slate, we start again, you put your money in here, you can repatriate your profits, you can have security of tenure, you can not be harassed or not be asked after the fact you put your money in to do extra things. I think whoever does that has got a fighting chance of getting the economy back together again.
I want to explore relations with the West a little bit further here. I mean, Emmerson Mnangagwa made that trip to the Commonwealth Heads of State Summit earlier this year. He's made quite a play for the West to pour money into Zimbabwe, but how does Zimbabwe then begin to balance the need for investment, especially from the West, with imperatives such as land redistribution, as we're seeing in South Africa, and trying to build an economy that is friendly to the majority black population in Harare and other areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think foreign investment is always a difficult bargain, because you're saying to somebody, you come in here and you're taking a little bit of control in a little place of our country, you're taking a slice of whatever we've got here in return for the money, hard currency you're bringing. I think it's a difficult one. I think that Zimbabwe's got to drive a hard bargain. I think Zimbabwe's got the will. I mean, I've spoken to foreign investors across this continent before, and they always say about Zimbabwe, sometimes a country like South Africa or maybe Nigeria may take you months to get a meeting with a minister. But in Zimbabwe, if you go with a project there, there'll be 3 or 4 ministers there in the same room saying, okay, what can we do? How can we make this work? I think they're probably a lot hungrier for investment maybe than other countries, but it seems that everybody these days is getting hungry for foreign investment. I think that again, you look at such a robust economy again. I mean, as I say, I worked there for a number of years as a journalist. If you look at the robust economy, you look at the fact they've got platinum, gold. They used to have a stunning agricultural sector that used to do export all over the world. They've got also all kinds of industries. They've got nickel. They've got a lot of things up there that are worth getting, that can create wealth for the people. And they will create wealth for the people eventually. But again, what it needs, somebody with a long-term vision, maybe to be very pragmatic and say, okay, here we go. We give you the confidence. Let's go ahead and let's try and rebuild this economy.
How does an eager Zimbabwe, one that is so desperate for investment and other assistance from the rest of the world, guard against exploitation then from the richer nations?
Well, as I say, it's a very, very difficult bargain sometimes to do. But then again, now is the time for nations like Zimbabwe to stand up and say, okay, yes, you put your money in here, but listen, we want these guarantees, we want these controls, we don't want our people exploited, we don't want just you exporting raw materials, we want beneficiation here, we want extra jobs created and wealth created here in Africa rather than exporting it overseas. And I don't see why not. I mean, there's still a lot of money floating around the world at the moment in the present economic conditions looking for places where they can get returns. So if you remember emerging markets like Zimbabwe and South Africa, you can do 25, 27% returns. Maybe in the Northern Hemisphere, you'll struggle to get 4 or 5%. That's what the risk is, but that's how the money goes.
Crucial to investment, the issue of infrastructure development. Zimbabwe has infrastructure that is in an appalling state at the moment. who comes in? Does that become a government imperative, or do they look to the Chinese, for example, who've made investments in that area in other parts of the continent?
Well, the Chinese, yes, they've already put quite a bit of investment there over the last 20, 30 years because of the political relations. But I think maybe he's opening it up to private money. I mean, I know for a fact that some of the big companies down here were doing infrastructure projects up there in Zimbabwe. One of the things about Zimbabwe, you must remember when I was working there back in the day, when we used to come back to Zimbabwe, say from Zambia, Mozambique, we would almost, kiss the ground when we came in because there was infrastructure, things were organized, you could do things, you could operate as a business and a journalist there. But in latter years, things have deteriorated, things have got difficult. And again, infrastructure is one of these things, you might get away with letting it run down for 5 to 10 years. But after that, then you've got problems. After that, you get so much time and expense in business trying to get around infrastructure problems that it's actually detracts from the business you're trying to do. So I think, again, you could say about it that there's a big chance that there's a lot of business after the elections in infrastructure, I think, certainly. And there's massive, because some of the infrastructure there in Zimbabwe was world-class, and things worked and things got through. But again, it's just difficult. It depends on not only who wins the election, but who they put in place. Are they going to put in place people who know what's going on? They put people who are prepared to compromise, people who are prepared to get on, people to see the future and the vision. That's the crucial thing for me next week.
Chris Bishop, thank you so much for coming in.